What's up, Packer fans? I'm Untitled Chapter, host of Porn Alert Packers podcast. Thank you for checking out this week's episode, or at least this episode so far this week. We're here to talk about the last 2 days of training camp. The Houston Texans visited the town of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I'm here to break it all down. I have a lot of things to cover in today's episode, so without further ado, it's time we pour ourselves another Packers podcast. So real quick before we get started, this is usually the portion where I ask you to subscribe and thank all of you for jumping on board and becoming a part of this community. But I really wanted to touch upon real quick, now that this is starting to gather a little bit more traction, I've had a number of subscribers over the last 2 weeks, just what this channel is all about. And I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time, but I did get in trouble, or I had a disgruntled comment in my previous video about the use of the F word to start off my last video. And trust me, that's not what this podcast is about. When I started this, I'm a diehard Packer fan, like I'm sure so many of you are. I'm out there to talk about Packer news. I wanted to change this up a little bit. I wanted to be different than some of the other videos that are out there. I like to have a drink on the show. I like to keep things a little bit loose. I like to give you a lot of information, and I want to create a community of Packer fans. At the end of the day, this is all about you guys. This is about me. I like the conversations that take place. I'm by far not a know-it-all when it comes to the Green Bay Packers. And will the occasional F-bomb or curse word slip? Yes, it will, but that's not... I don't want that to turn any of you away. I think those who are true fans or true subscribers or people who enjoy this content, don't get too bogged down about the curse words. I will keep them at a minimum, but again, I don't want to rant too much about it. I will apologize if that last guy ever watches another one of my videos. I apologize. I can't please everyone, but I am going to please all of you that are tuned in the episode. So with that being said, the Packers finished up the second of their joint practices with the Houston Texans yesterday. And there is a difference of opinion going on out there in Green Bay between LaFleur and Rodgers when it comes to these joint practices. So Rodgers said in his locker room interview yesterday, "I'm glad it's over. The tough part is they're not trying to show us a whole lot. We're not trying to show them a whole lot. There wasn't a ton of diversity in the plays. The physicality is a good thing. Going against someone else is a good thing, but schematically there just wasn't a whole lot to show." He later went on to say, "I wouldn't mind if they didn't do another joint practice for another 14 years. Because if you remember back, the last time the Packers did a joint practice was Rodgers' rookie year. They actually had a joint practice, I believe, with the Baltimore Ravens, and that was the one and only time. It's a very rare thing to happen in Green Bay. But again, we have a brand new head coach, and things are changing. Things are changing constantly. So LaFleur, on the other hand, loved the energy and intensity level that happened in the last 2 days of training camp. At one point, there were 4 different team periods going on at once. They had 2 different sessions of 7-on-7, and those were intertwined with 2 different sessions of the offensive linemen going against the defensive linemen in their one-on-one drills. LaFleur goes on to quote, "These guys are sick of going against each other, and you get used to the looks, so it's just good competition. From an offensive perspective, they see some different coverages. From a defensive perspective, they do different things that we don't with how they utilize their quarterback and some of the zone read action that they do." When asked whether or not LaFleur would be open to more joint practices, possibly next year or in the future, without even a little bit of hesitation, LaFleur goes, "Absolutely, 100%. I want to do this again. I'd like to do it multiple times a training camp if I could." So he would like to not only have one team come in and visit, he would like to have multiple teams come in and visit, which, if there's going to be any drama between the head coach and the quarterback, this might be where some of that stuff starts. I don't see it on the play calling side of it, but I do see a little difference of opinions because Rodgers in his interview, he just seemed annoyed. He seemed like the last 2 days were just a stressful cluster. And he just didn't really want to be a part of that joint practice anymore. When Rodgers was asked if the joint practices unfolded as he expected, he jokingly answered, "Yeah, just maybe a couple more fights." And to segue from that statement, in case you missed it, during a fairly early 11-on-11 period on Monday, rookie tight end Jay Sternberger caught a pass on a crossing route and got lit up by rookie cornerback Lonnie Johnson. The hit knocked off Sternberger's helmet, But if that wasn't enough to add insult to injury, Johnson then stood over him and did a little bit of a flexing motion. It did not take too long for the offensive line, led by offensive lineman Lucas Patrick, and the rest of the guys to come over there and create a huddle, a skirmish, if you will, broke out. They like to call it a fight. I don't know how intense it actually got. I don't know if there were too many punches thrown, but regardless, the hit was unnecessary. Johnson was immediately removed from practice by Houston's head coach Bill O'Brien, and actually he did not practice at all on Tuesday following that incident. And I think it was in the best interest of everyone involved if they just kept him away from the players, because there were Instagram posts going out, there were Twitter accounts blowing up just about how the Packers felt about this situation and that he better keep his head on a swivel, for lack of a better term. Sternberger, on the other hand, did finish out practice on Monday, but he was held out of practice on Tuesday. They're saying that he's being evaluated for a concussion and he also has a jaw injury. So a jaw injury is going to be very common, especially if you get a helmet knocked off of your head. But my entire thoughts on this joint practice is it's almost shaped out to be, or it turned out to be, exactly what Rodgers feared, is that you don't get a whole lot of work done and you always have that risk of these players getting into fights. You obviously see them all over the place when it comes to other training camps that hold joint practices, and I don't know if this one was all that big of one or that big of a deal. But it's obviously not productive. It creates a whole lot of animosity towards these guys. It shows a brotherhood in a sense that these guys, the Packers, have each other's back. There's that brotherhood that I preach about and that I want to see on the Packers side of the ball. But I don't really know if it accomplished what they need to. I think when they go out and play each other tomorrow night, on Thursday night, you will see, you'll get the work in, you'll get the film, and you'll get all the results that you want out of your training camp and out of your team. Heading into that, coming out of that game, I should say. So outside of that Sternberger injury, Trevor Davis also sat out of practice on Tuesday with a stinger injury, which was aggravated by a special teams kick return on Monday. So he got whacked by the Houston Texans, went out with a stinger injury. And the rest of the injury list just continues to grow. We have 13 total players that reported on Tuesday's injury list. That is running back Trey Carson joined both starting running backs Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Kevin King is dealing with another hamstring issue that caused him to miss some time last season, so that hopefully isn't all that bad. Cornerback Josh Jackson has yet to make an appearance. We add in 3 linebackers, center Corey Linsley, and defensive tackle Fidel Brown. And then finally, linebacker Preston Smith left practice Tuesday early because of some back spasms. Oh, and if there was one other thing, Jason Spriggs also did not make practice, and that actually turns out to be because he got cut from the team. But I'll touch upon that in a second. So none of these injuries, none of these new injuries are the ones that are on the injury report. Seem to be a long-term concern. They're mainly precautionary. However, 13 players on that injury list is not exactly the ideal position that you want to be in heading into that first game of the preseason, and especially when there hasn't been much tackling. There hasn't been a whole lot of tackling up to this point. I've talked about this in my last video. I don't want to beat a dead horse by any means, but I'm thinking, it's if you don't play fast, this is exactly what happens. Is when the intensity cranks up. This can be an area where injuries can happen, and perhaps that's going hand in hand with what we're seeing. I'm not gonna put a firm stamp on that one. I think the most concerning of these injuries on the list has to be Kevin King. Like I stated a little bit earlier, he struggled with the hamstring injury last year, and that caused him to miss some time. I think they're not saying, they're very close-lipped about exactly how bad or the severity of his injury is. They're not saying even whether it's the same hamstring. It could possibly be a different hamstring from some reports. Matt LaFleur hasn't come out and said a whole lot about it, but that would be a bad thing. That would be a crippling thing. That would almost put the axe in the Kevin King. I still think he makes the roster, but I mean, if he can't stay healthy for another full season, the Packers definitely have to go out there and look for some additional help, whether in free agency or in possibly next year's draft, because that whole area is very thin. So to follow up on Jason Spriggs, though, like I said, he was injured. He hurt his elbow, or his arm, I think it was his elbow, last week. He didn't participate in family night, and then of course he wasn't there for the Houston Texans practices. So yesterday afternoon, Spriggs was released by the Green Bay Packers, resulting in the Packers then going on to signing another running back in former Buffalo Bill Keith Ford. I don't want to dive too much into Keith Ford. I think some of that will eventually come out as we get to, see him play some more. But Spriggs' departure was something that I suspected a couple of weeks ago a week ago when he went out with that elbow injury, and the Nostradamus magical crystal ball seems to have been right, and I think a lot of the problem with this is that right tackle position now becomes a lot more interesting with Spriggs no longer being part of that roster. Brian Bulaga is still without a doubt the starting right tackle on that offensive line. However, they have been cautious with him. They have held him out of numerous practices. He's coming into that 10th season. He's a veteran, so that they're not too worried about his age. And why would they be? I mean, during a third down pass set drill on Tuesday, Bulaga was matched up against J.J. Watt in 4 reps and won the battle all 4 times. And if that doesn't tell you that he is ready, then I don't know what else will. So Bulaga is going to be fine. They're going to just kind of nurse him throughout this training camp. Hopefully he can make it throughout the whole season and go all 19, 20 games that it takes to win a Super Bowl. But more interestingly, this opens up the door for Alex Light. So Alex Light is one of those guys on the depth chart for right tackle. He was last year's undrafted free agent. He was assigned by the Packers last year. He played in 25 snaps at right tackle last year, and 23 of those were in the season finale against the Lions. So Gutekunst went on to say Monday, Alex has gotten a lot of valuable reps over the last couple of days, which I think he needs. I think it's developing, but I'm excited. Now, I'm going to get ahead of myself, but this is one of those things that I think we need to watch, especially this is going to be on my radar of things to watch in tomorrow night's game, is that right tackle position. You have obviously Alex Light, who is now probably going to take the whole first half of the game at that position. I'm not sure Bulaga even plays hardly at all. So it's going to be really interesting to see what we have for depth there. Like I have stated before, Bulaga is probably coming into his final season. Billy Turner can shift out to that right tackle spot if they need him to, but at the end of the day, you got to have someone that can fill in if need be. And we need to build some depth there because Spriggs was a bust. They gave him 4 years on the Packers, and it just didn't turn out to be anything like they thought he would be for the player. And bye, Felicia. That's all you got to say about that. In other news that continues to draw upon a theme, the Packers defense continues to look like a problem for opposing offenses heading into the 2019 season. So on Monday, Montravius Adams delivered his best practice of camp so far and was a big problem for the middle of the Texans offensive line with his speed and strength. Kyler Fackrell finally made some headlines because we haven't talked about him at all so far in training camp. And he made his headlines on his ability to get through that second-team offensive line. He blew up a handful of pass plays and was kind of explosive. He was very disruptive on that offensive line. And if he's the Packers' 4th best edge rusher heading into the 2019 season, that says something. That says that we have some mad talent among that pass rush for the Green Bay Packers. With King sitting out, nursing that hamstring injury, cornerback Tony Brown has continued to make some waves in these first couple weeks. On family night, he had a pick 6 against DeShone Kizer and the second team offense. So I'm not sure how many of you caught that game since it was televised. But Kizer just not looking all that good. And then yesterday during a third down drill, he knocked a pass away from the man DeAndre Hopkins. And they're also trying him out at a kick return position. So I'm really liking what I'm hearing from Tony Brown. It seems like he is getting a lot of opportunity to shine in multiple different roles, and that's always good for one of those bubble players when he can be kind of thrown around in different positions and excel at some of those different positions. In regards to the rest of the defense, on third down drills Monday, the Packers had Gary, both Preston and Zadarius Smith and Kenny Clark on the field together, and often they were collapsing the pocket around Deshaun Watson and causing all sorts of havoc for the Texans' first-string offensive line. Numerous reports from spectators that were at camp yesterday continue to echo that Zadarius Smith is a wrecking machine, and this is I mean, no surprise if you've been following the Packers the last couple weeks. But while there's no sack in the quarterback, Zadarius had 2 would-have-been sacks on Deshaun Watson. One was on the final play of a 2-minute drill, and the other was a little bit earlier on in the period after stunning outside from an inside position. So, man, if Zeke or Z, I think they're calling him Z. If Aaron Rodgers calls him Z. If Zeke can hold up to his $66 million contract, that would be huge for the Green Bay Packers and the success of that defense. This goes back to from last year when Khalil Mack was a free agent, or he wasn't a free agent. He wanted to get out of Oakland, and the Packers were in consideration, and we saw the Bears take him and what it just did to their defense, how it pretty much took them from the bottom to the top of the NFC North. I'm not going to put a full-on comparison to Zadarius Smith. Trust me, I'm not comparing. They're not apples to apples. But if you can bring in a guy like Zadarius Smith and he has that sort of impact where offensive linemen are struggling to block him, we're talking about Bulaga, we're talking about David Bakhtiari struggling to block him. We're talking about the Texans now having offensive line problems at keeping him away from the quarterback. This is that's exciting news. Is that not? It's exciting news. This just brings home the point that Rashawn Gary, who has also shown flashes all throughout training camp, does not need to be the savior when it comes to that rookie class and being that number one pick for the Packers, number 12. This shows that they went out, they made the right move, and if Smith can go out there and take a lot of that weight off of Rashawn Gary's shoulders, and he can just go out there and be great, that says a whole lot about what we can expect from that pass rush. And don't forget, I watched a little bit of last Thursday night's football game against the Broncos and the Falcons, and one thing that I forget is that if you can get pressure on the quarterback with your defensive rush, that's just going to open up that opportunity for cornerbacks like Alexander, hopefully King, Tramon Williams, hopefully Josh Jackson, to go out there, make interceptions, and create turnovers. And it all starts with that pass rush. And it sounds like we might have this whole pass rush thing figured out. On the other hand, let's talk about that offense side of the ball. So on Monday, the offense struggled in competitive 7-on-7 drills. Quarterbacks were caught holding on the ball too long and checking down to running backs. Rodgers did have some pretty throws to both Devontae Adams and Robert Tonyan, but both Kaiser and Boyle have really struggled. And Kaiser threw an ugly interception across the middle of the field, and he had an ugly interception on family night to Tony Brown. And he's got just a terrible resume so far with his career in Green Bay. So I'm going to be watching very closely to see if Kaiser is even worth keeping on the roster. I'm again getting ahead of myself as far as what things to watch for tomorrow night's preseason opener. I'm going to hold off on that, but it has to do with Kaiser. It has to do with his backup quarter situation. On Tuesday, the first string offense went 3 and out during its two-minute drill against the Texans, and then to follow it up, they failed to score a touchdown in their red zone period as well. So this offense has got to start to get some things together, and all indications are that Rodgers will not play in the preseason opener tomorrow night, and that has me scratching my head. Literally it has me scratching my head. I don't know why you wouldn't at least put him out there for a couple series. Yes, we don't want to have injuries, but we have to figure out this offense. We need to figure out this offense sooner than later. If they weren't able to get any productive offensive work out of your joint practices, then you should play him a little bit more in the preseason against some of these teams so he can get a flow, so that these guys can get on the same page and get that urgency and get up to the huddle, because these are all things that LaFleur is obviously worried about. He won't pull the panic alarm quite yet on this offense, because he sees some good things, he sees some bad things. But I would love to see at least Rodgers suit up and play one series or two series and just see if we can get the ball down the field, get ourselves in field goal range, score a touchdown. I don't know, just move the ball, get the offense going, and get things just kind of pointing, get the needle pointing in the right direction. Because right now, the needle is far from pointing in the right direction. But it's not all bad news for that Packers offense. So both offensive linemen, Billy Turner and Elton Jenkins, had dominant reps in one-on-one pass blocking drills on Monday against the Texans. And wide receiver Jake Kumerow continues. We're going to have to call him Mr. August here unless he shows up in the regular season. But he continues to impress these days, just like he did last year. On family night, Kumerow had 2 very impressive catches. He stretched out to make that 17-yard catch from Tim Boyle. He had another 14-yard back shoulder catch from Aaron Rodgers. On special teams, he's impressed Larry McCarron as a gunner on punt coverage. So if you watch 3 Things on Packers.com, that's where I pulled this one from. But he was flying down the field with intensity and right into the receiver's face as a gunner in that punt kick, the punt team. and got right in the face of the receiver. Would have been a fair catch. And then during red zone work on Tuesday, he managed to find space in the Houston Texans defense to catch a touchdown from Deshaun Kaiser. So he is showing that he's multifaceted as well, just like Tony Brown. That he can not only be, that receiver that Rodgers just, obviously has high regards for. He loves to have him on his roster, but he can be someone that makes a difference in the special teams. And he's just we're all behind this guy. He's he's a stud. He's an absolute stud. Larry went on to say, at some point during this camp, we're going to stop thinking of Kumerow as a cool story and start thinking of him as a real good football player that can contribute a whole lot of different ways. So the guys that are actually at these training camps, actually watching the practices unfold, seeing these guys go out there and play, they are speaking high praise about a number of guys. These guys are obviously Kumerow. These guys are Rashawn Gary. These guys are Zadarius Smith. They have all been making headlines. Danny Vitale is obviously making a whole lot of headlines. And these are some of the things that I am going to be looking for as we head into the Thursday night game. So I already mentioned the performance of Alex Light and the other right tackles competing for that position heading into tomorrow night game. So I'm going to have my eyes on that. These are things that you should definitely have your eyes on as well. Outside of Kumerow, keep an eye out for rookie receiver Darius Shepard. He had some flashes. He had a great catch in family night. He's had some flashes throughout training camp as well. He's kind of just come out of nowhere, for lack of a better term. And I see 5 locks at this point on Wednesday morning, August 7th. I see 5 locks at that wide receiver position. We have Adams, we have Allison, Scantling, Kumerow, and Davis are my 5 locks. And I would not be surprised if Shepard has a great showing on Thursday night and the rest of the preseason. And I want to see him maybe step up and make a more significant impact. And the other person on that receiver spot that I want to hopefully see some more out of is Jamon Moore. So again, he was our highest picked receiver last year, and nobody's talking about him whatsoever. He needs to have a great game. He needs to catch the ball. He needs to show that they picked right with that pick. I'm not sure. I can't remember quite which round. He might have been 2nd or 3rd round, maybe 4th round. He was an early pick. But he needs to have a great game, or else he has the potential of getting cut. Because with Shepard making the roster, that puts us at 6 wide receivers. Seems like we're going to keep 3,000 running backs, so you got to figure out exactly what you have at that wide receiver position. The other thing that I'm going to keep an eye out for on Thursday night's game. So we have to talk about our young secondary. With Jackson and King both out, and Alexander will probably play a little bit, maybe the full first quarter, maybe half the first quarter. But the spotlight is on cornerback Tony Brown to go out there. He's going to play most of the game. We have rookie Kabion Ento and Kadar Holman. So both these guys are rookies that are going to get a lot of snaps on that Packers defense. And I want to see these guys show that we can have some depth at that cornerback position. So if King possibly struggles with that hamstring injury throughout the entire season, who can step in behind him? Because we have Alexander, we hopefully will have Josh Jackson back, and we have Tramon Williams. Those are our 3 guys, but we need a little bit more depth because the football season is long and injuries are bound to happen. I also expect or hope to see Darnell Savage get a decent amount of reps. That's all going to depend on how the Packers feel about his health. But I imagine by now he should be up for some team activities or for some preseason action. And then along at that safety position, I want to see Raven Green. He has filled in a lot for Savage while he sat out the first couple days of training camp, and I expect him to get a lot of snaps and play most of the game. 2 other things to keep an eye out for Thursday night's game, and then I wrap up this video. Our quarterback situation. So all indications heading into Thursday, as I stated, that Aaron Rodgers will not play. Now, LaFleur was a little bit gray on this. He was pretty much black and white heading into Tuesday's practice, stating that, Rodgers doesn't need to play, but he was going to watch some film and maybe Rodgers will get a couple snaps. But who steps up? As I've said before, Kaiser does not seem like he's going to be the answer for that backup quarterback position. I'm a really big fan, well, in regards to what we have at quarterback, I'm a bigger fan of Tim Boyle possibly being the backup to Aaron Rodgers. And then you also have Manny Wilkins, who is, there. I mean, he's there. He's an option. If Kaiser completely falls on his face and just can't do it, you have someone else. You have 4 quarterbacks on the roster right now. Any one of those 3, it's honestly just flip a coin and we'll see what happens. One of these guys needs to start to separate themselves from the competition. If it's not Kaiser, you have to start to say, farewell to that person and move on, and that might be the end of Kaiser's career. these other guys obviously are going to have a shot to go out there and compete. And especially if Rodgers is not playing, you're going to have plenty of time for these guys to go out there and show what they got. The last and final point of things to watch on Thursday night game is the running back competition. So we have 7 running backs currently on the Green Bay roster, and that includes the signing of Keith Ford on Tuesday. Although 3 of these guys are out with injuries, so you have Trey Carson, Aaron Jones, and Jamal Williams. I really like to see 1, if not 2 of these guys start to differentiate or separate from the pack as well. If I had to bet some Monopoly money on this, I would say that Dexter Williams is probably going to get the majority of the snaps out of all the guys that are left over in that running back room. But I'd like to see 1 more possibly appear. And then on a side note, I expect Danny Vitale to have a significant impact as well in the preseason game. If he continues to be in the game when the Texans' 2nd and 3rd string defense is on the field, then it's going to just be, he's going to be running havoc all over the place, especially if they utilize him. But these are some of the things that I suggest you guys keep an eye out for. That's what I'm going to be watching on Thursday night's game. And that kind of sums up what I want to talk about in this video. I had a lot of content. I tried to talk as fast as I could, cram it in as fast as I could. My next video is going to be Friday, so the game's tomorrow night. I'm going to do a little bit of a follow-up and a recap of things that unfolded on Thursday's game. And again, as always, I appreciate you guys checking out this episode, checking out the video, and subscribing to the channel. Go ahead and comment down below what some of your highlights have been so far in the Packers training camp. And again, I truly do appreciate all you guys for being a part of this. It started as an idea 3-4 months ago. I seem to grab 10, 15, 20 subscribers a day, and it's fun to see it grow. It's fun to see more and more comments in the conversation. I comment on all the comments that take place down below, at least unless it's just a paragraph of a question or a comment, in which case I just get lost in all the possibilities of things I can talk about. And you know who you are. You know who I'm talking about. So without further ado, I will see you guys on Friday. Enjoy our first preseason game. Packers football is back. And until next time, I will see you on the internet. Thanks for watching.